A guide to reading and understanding research. After viewing this presentation, you will have a better understanding of what a literature review is and how to pull key information from this type of research. What is a literature review? Literature reviews synthesize or analyze research already conducted in other sources. They generally summarize the current state of research on a given topic. A literature review can be just a simple summary of the sources, which is a recap of the important information of those sources. But it usually has an organizational pattern and combines a summary, analysis, and synthesis. An analysis examines elements of each source, while a synthesis involves reorganizing that information to form a theory or understanding. It might give a new interpretation of old material or trace the progression of a field. The sources of a literature review are typically organized either chronologically, which means it's based on the time of the publication, by the publications themselves, or by trend, theme, or research methodology. This type of research often includes tables with lists from various studies and research articles. This can be a helpful way to determine that what you are reading is a literature review. We will take a look at some examples of these tables when we look at a literature review together. When you are given an assignment involving literature reviews, the following questions can be helpful. What is my purpose for reading this? Does this article match my purpose? What information do I need from this article? And most importantly, what is the focus of this literature review? As you'll see, the focus or the topic of the literature review is crucial to your understanding. Sections of literature reviews. The abstract provides a snapshot of what will be included in the article. The body of the article, which is the review of the literature, is organized into sections the authors thought would best convey the information they want to share. The conclusion re-summarizes what was discussed and provides recommendations for future research or for how readers can use the article. The sections of a literature review are largely determined by the authors and what they are synthesizing. So here's a tip. Since literature reviews vary in the way that they are organized, I always start by reading the title and abstract and scanning through the headings and tables to get an idea of the structure. Let's do that now. Here's a research article from the journal, Research and Practice for Persons with Severe Disabilities. Always start by reading the title, which is Evidence-Based Practices for Learners with Severe Intellectual Disability. What does this title tell me? Well, it tells me what the central focus is, and that is evidence-based practices, or EBPs. It also tells me who the research was focused on, or the population, and in this case it is learners with severe intellectual disability. Next, I read the abstract. I'm going to read the abstract to you. While I read, I want you to think about what information you get from the abstract. Because of their highly intensive and variable learning needs, learners with severe intellectual disability present significant challenges to special educators and other stakeholders in terms of selecting and implementing effective instructional practices. Although scholars have made considerable progress in conducting and synthesizing research necessary to identify evidence-based practices, or EBPs, much work remains to enable evidence-based reforms to broadly improve instruction and outcomes for learners with severe intellectual disability. In this article, we describe the importance of evidence-based reforms for learners with severe intellectual disability, discuss advances in the identification of EBPs for these learners, including a summary of the interventions identified as EBPs for this population in the professional literature and by online resources, and conclude with recommendations for improving the identification and implementation of EBPs for this population. So what information did I get from that abstract? The first thing I notice is that it gives me the rationale or the reason for the literature review. And in this case, the rationale is that work is needed in evidence-based reform because it is challenging for special educators to meet the highly intensive and variable learning needs of students with severe intellectual disability. We also get an idea of how the article will be organized. It seems that the main sections will include the importance of reform, advances in identification of EBPs, a summary of EBPs, and a conclusion that will make recommendations for improving the identification and implementation of EBPs for learners with severe intellectual disabilities. Let's continue scanning to see how this article is organized. The following 2 pages include 3 bold headings: Importance of Basing Practice and Research for Learners with Severe Intellectual Disability, Advances in EBPs for Learners with Severe Intellectual Disability, and EBPs identified in professional literature. The bold headings show me these are key components to the review. Now I see subheadings, and I know that they're subheadings because each subheading is in italics and is in a thinner font. The author chose to organize the previous section, EBPs identified in professional literature, into reading skills, mathematics skills, science skills, and academic skills. You can see they synthesized or reorganized information from the professional literature into academic areas. Also, notice Table 1 that lists the EBPs based on skill area and the research study that the practice came from. And it organizes it quite nicely for you. A new heading is listed in bold: EBPs identified in online resources. So I can predict that the next few headings are going to be subheadings, just like the professional literature was organized into subheadings. But this time we will be focusing on online resources. See? Online resources include National Autism Center's National Standards Project, National Professional Development Center, NPDC on ASDs, and NSTTAC. By organizing it in this way, readers can go online to the different sources to find more information on the EBPs. Also, note that there are 2 more tables. Table 2 lists the established practices for students with autism spectrum disorder. Established means that there are some studies showing an evidence-based. Although I want to point out that this article was published in 2015. It is important to be mindful of when the article was published, especially when looking at things like established practices, because it is possible that in the years since its publication, there have been more studies conducted on these practices that may now consider some of these practices, again, evidence-based. Now let's look at Table 3. This table shows evidence-based practices from the NPDC. Because it says evidence-based, we note that these practices do have enough research supporting them to be considered evidence-based. The next major heading is Considerations for Advancing Evidence-Based Education for Learners with Severe Intellectual Disability. I see that we are moving from sources to considerations for advancement, so I'm getting an idea that the authors are moving to the future. First, we see a table that shows more evidence-based practices from the last source listed on the previous page, NSTTAC. It's organized based on practices that are including specific skills that were taught and how many studies participants, so studies and participants, were included in those studies. This can be helpful when finding research for skills that you want to teach. For example, you may say, I want to teach my students how to go grocery shopping. So I can use, I can use this practice to teach them grocery shopping. I see grocery shopping here, so I can use this practice to teach grocery shopping, etc. Again, we are in the section on considerations, which include ongoing need for high-quality research, recognizing and reconciling different sets of EBP standards, terminology, need for trustworthy and accessible online resources, and resources to facilitate implementation. The authors then move to the conclusion, which briefly summarizes the article and provides recommendations. And finally, the references are listed. In the references section, any study, fact, or tool referenced in this article is listed, and this can be used to find additional studies if needed. Let's recap. Now that we've scanned the article, we identify patterns and how it is organized. It's framed by the abstract and conclusion that are traditional components of research articles. This won't necessarily tell you that what you are reading is a literature review because it's included in many different types of research. The following sections give you an idea of what was happening by giving background information and an introduction, and the importance of basing the practice on research and the advances in those practices. Then it moves to listing the other EBPs they found and organizing those based on where they found them, the professional research and online resources. Finally, they give you what is needed or the considerations needed for continuing to improve on research and evidence-based instruction for this population. With the structure in mind, you can efficiently read the article and gather the necessary information. Here's the reference for this article. I hope you now have a better understanding of what a literature review is because of this presentation. Thank you for watching.